The crisis came for me in the summer of 1978. That was the summer between my sophomore and junior years in college. The summer I was supposed to decide what my major would be. I'd been putting it off as long as possible, taking all the required courses and squandering my electives on things like drama and printing and filmmaking and photography. But at the beginning of my junior year, I had to declare a major. And so there in the summer just before, I was trying to decide what that major would be. For reasons I can only imagine, I had been dreaming about a Mercedes-Benz coupe and wondering how I would ever get one. My father was a Presbyterian minister working among the poor in West Virginia. He had taken what amounted to a vow of poverty when he accepted that call, and so we never had much money. Maybe that was why I began to think that when I was on my own, things would be different. Maybe that's why I began to think about declaring a pre-med major. We lived in an old white farmhouse up on a hill overlooking the railroad tracks. My brothers and I used to sleep out on the upstairs front porch in the summers, dragging our mattresses out there so we could hear the chirp of the crickets and the deep croak of the bullfrogs. After we had talked ourselves out each night, just before I fell asleep, I would pray, God, what do you want me to be? And when I woke up in the morning, I would pray again, God, what do you want me to be? As the summer wore on, those prayers became more urgent. I had this idea that declaring my major would determine my future, that I stood at a point from which the full trajectory of my life would arc out in one direction or another. For that reason, I wanted to be sure that the direction I chose was the right one. That's why I was asking God in the first place. But by the end of the summer, I was tired of asking. I needed an answer soon. I woke up one morning and demanded, God, what do you want me to be? And the answer came back as clearly as if someone had spoken it aloud. Be a Christian. What? Be a Christian. And that was it. I lay there for a long time afterwards, wondering if I had dreamed up the answer to my own question. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. As long as I loved and served Christ, I could be anything I wanted to be. I breathed a sigh of relief and decided then and there that when I got back to college, I would declare a pre-med major. Barbara Brown Taylor tells a story that is almost identical, and for that reason wonderfully confirming. In her book, The Preaching Life, she confesses that she struggled with her sense of call for years. One midnight, she writes, I asked God to tell me as plainly as possible what I was supposed to do. Anything that pleases you. That is the answer that came into my sleepy head. What? I said, waking up. What kind of an answer is that? Do anything that pleases you, the voice in my head said again, and belong to me. That simplified things considerably. Taylor writes, I could pump gas in Idaho or dig latrines in Pago Pago as far as God was concerned, as long as I remembered whose I was. In the silence that followed, she decided it would please her very much to be a priest. And to the great benefit of so many of us, she still is. My career as a pre-med major, on the other hand, lasted exactly one semester. I was taking calculus, microbiology, organic chemistry, and hating all of it. If this is what you have to know to be a doctor, I thought, then I don't want to be one. I dropped out of school for a semester, transferred to another college, switched to an art major, graduated, got married, and for a while worked as a graphic designer. But then I took a job as a part-time youth minister, began to assist in leading worship, and one day, in the spring of 1984, some well-meaning person at church asked if I had ever thought about being a pastor. And the crisis was on again. I began to pray those same fervent prayers, lying in bed at night, hoping to see a scroll unrolled from the ceiling with a message from God just for me. I searched the Scriptures, wrote in my journal, talked to anyone who would listen. But finally I remembered the lesson I had learned in the summer of 1978. God had called me to be a Christian, and I had said yes. As far as God was concerned, then I was free to do whatever I pleased. And like Barbara Brown Taylor, I decided it would please me very much to enter the ministry. 20 years later, I'm still here, and I still don't have that Mercedes coupe. William Willimon says the question of our vocation is settled at our baptism. When we say yes to Christ, we answer the most important call that will ever come our way, the call to follow Jesus, to be His disciple, to take our part in bringing in that crazy upside-down kingdom He was always talking about. Even more important than what we do, then, is who we are. Be a Christian, that voice said to me. Belong to me, that voice said to Barbara. And then do whatever pleases you. But does that mean that everyone can or should be a minister? Not everyone seems to be good at it, even the ones who feel called to it. My wife asked recently, if it's God who calls people into ministry in the first place, then why does He call some good ones and some bad ones? Why doesn't He just call the good ones? It was a good question. I didn't have an answer for her right away, but the next morning I woke up and wrote in my journal, what if God calls everyone into ministry and just has to make do with the ones who say yes? Was that possible? Later that day, I called some of the people I thought had the right kind of gifts for ministry, people in whom I had seen some evidence of this mysterious calling we often talk about. Listen, I said, as if their lives weren't already complicated enough. What if God calls everyone into ministry and just has to make do with the ones who say yes? And then I listened to the long silence on the other end of the line. Can I just tell you that out of the 3 people I called that day, 2 have enrolled in seminary? They said yes, in other words. They decided that if they could do whatever they wanted, it would please them very much to enter the ministry. And why not? Frederick Buechner says that vocation is that place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. I know the world is hungry for good ministry. And if the thought of being a minister in such a world makes you glad, then say yes. Say yes, yes, yes. I have to confess that there have been some times when I was less than glad to be a minister. And some Sundays still when I tremble under the weight of trying to speak a word for God. But on those days I try to remember that while I am the one who made the choice to enter the ministry, there was a choice before that one. The choice God made in calling me to be His in the first place. That's the voice that whispers in the morning hour and in the middle of the night, and the choice that precedes all other choices. Be a Christian. Belong to me. And remember, I chose you.